So let's start building our framework. We'll be getting something visual on the screen. We'll start by making sure we have our app added as the ng app. And for the body, we want to take over the full viewport, the full screen. And the way to do that with Bootstrap is to add a class of container fluid. And that way our body will take up the full screen on the left and right edges. Now, how do we want to be able to use these modules? If we look at the external modules again, you can see we have our PS Framework module, and that's what we want to take up the full screen. So the easiest way to make use of that would be to create a custom directive, and we can call it PS Framework. So from an HTML perspective, this is all we're going to need for now. We just need to create this custom directive, PS Framework. We'll go to that folder, and we'll add a new JavaScript file. We'll call it PS Framework Directive. We'll grab our module, and of course we want the PS Framework module, and we'll call directive on it. The directive name will be PS Framework, and of course that'll be converted into our snake case PS-framework when we use it in HTML. And we'll just pass it a function here. If you'd like to use an IIFE, that's fine too. There's really no technical need for it since we can define the function directly in the directive call. And the function needs to return an object. And one thing we might want to do, especially when it comes to the menu, we might want to embed the menu within our PS Framework. So let's set transclusion to true. Transclude true. We also want to work with an isolate scope. And we'll pass information into this soon, but for right now, let's just leave it empty. We'll want to create a controller for this directive. We'll call it PS Framework Controller. And we want to add a template URL field. So we're setting our template URL to this HTML file. It's going to be found in external modules, PS Framework, and we'll be adding the file in here shortly. And we'll be naming it PS Framework Template.html. Now, whenever you see this template URL field, a red flag should go up in your mind. First of all, we're creating a reusable component. So there might be dozens or hundreds or maybe even thousands of different projects that are going to be using this component. And if we have to force each project to contain this exact path for an HTML file, things are going to go a little bit haywire. Some people might read the documentation and get it right, but for the most part, it's just not a good idea. And that's where Grunt and Gulp come in. If we can do some kind of automated source code processing, we can just grab this file and stuff it into the $template cache service. Another thing we could do is just have it remove template URL and just have it populate the template field instead of template URL. But we'll worry about that later. For now, since we're in development, the best way to go is to just use template URL. That way we can take advantage of the full IDE. We'll get code completion and IntelliSense, and it's just the easiest way to develop. We'll automate things later with Grunt or Gulp. So let's go ahead and create the controller and create our view. I'll add a JavaScript file for the controller, and I'll add an HTML page for the view. That'll be PS Framework Template.html. And let's populate these a little bit. I'll take our view, and for now we'll just put some dummy text in here. And for our controller, let's just add a simple controller that doesn't do much. We'll name it PS Framework Controller. And I'm just going to min-safe the code here. We'll pass in scope. And here's our function that accepts scope. It's getting more and more common just to leave the min-safe out and have a post-processing task handle that for us. For example, we could just have Gulp notice that we have a scope here and include the min-safe array for us. So our controller setup, we have our template, which is simply going to show the view is showing. The directive should be okay. And let's just take one more look at our index.html file. And here's our custom directive that we're creating. Let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. I'll run it in Chrome. And we can see that our custom directive is working. The view is showing. So now in order to get our framework to look like a real framework, all we need to do is update this view. All the other pieces are in place.